maybe he's running, blah, 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 turns his head, jumps, there's an effort, and then he takes a hit and he rolls, 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 rolls. Maybe he's running and he has a specific rhythm to his run, so your breath has to be
Welcome to Behind the Slate, where I sit down with fellow voice actors and other industry artists to have a fireside chat. I'm your host, Christian O'Boyle. If you'd like to know more about me, please check out my website at christianoboyle.com. In this episode, I'll be talking with Griffin Puatu, an actor and singer prominently working in the animation and video game industry. From the time he could talk, Griffin had a passion for using his voice to entertain others. He would sing along to the radio and quote lines from animated movies and imitating the characters' voices. This early passion soon translated into singing, musical theater, improv, stage acting, and eventually voice acting. Griffin has appeared in several anime titles, most recently as Jonah Bostel from Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative, as well as Ryan Cure in Kengen Ashura, Wai Peng in Forest Piano, as well as other various anime titles. He has also voiced in several video games, including Nintendo's WarioWare Gold, Yokai Watch 3, Square Enix's Just Cause 4, and River City Girls. So what is something that got you into acting?
Oh, good question. I got into acting very, very young. I think the earliest memory of me wanting to do acting, or sort of the beginnings of that, was I grew up in a pretty big family. I have 4 siblings, and we all grew up watching like the same set of movies, Disney movies. We all had like a certain amount of VHS tapes and DVDs we would watch, and we'd watch them so much that sort of like in between when we wouldn't be watching them, we'd be thinking about them and quoting lines to those movies. And
Mhm.
for whatever reason, um, whenever I quoted a line, I had to do it in the character's voice, or it didn't feel right to me. Like, and this was like 4 or 5 years old. I was doing this, and that was the beginning of it. It made my siblings laugh and parents laugh. So um, that eventually did like small you know church plays and musicals and stuff like that, and that was sort of probably the earliest memory of wanting to act,
Yeah.
was that. Yeah.
So how did that formulate and get you on stage? I believe you said you've done some theater. How did that get you into theater, and then how'd you fall into voice acting from there?
Yeah, so in high school, I started to get a clearer sense w- of performing and acting being something that I enjoyed, that I was good at, and that I wanted to do at some level. Um, in a couple years before that, in middle school, I was introduced to anime, and I started watching English dubs of anime, and that's when I started noticing, oh, this character from this show is also the voice of this character from this show. Like I started picking out the same voices, and
Mhm.
that's sort of when it clicked for me. Like, oh, this is like a job people have, like, because you don't really you kind of know the information, but you don't make that
You
connection
don't process it.
until, yeah, right, until I made that connection. So in high school, I started doing choir and musical theater. That was sort of my introduction into proper, more serious acting. I my teachers encouraged us to take it as seriously as we could while also having fun. So I learned a lot in that time, and I learned a lot about myself. I think there's a particular memory I remember. It was my junior year, and we were doing this Disney musical Aida, and it was Tech Week. So it was the day that the lighting crew was blocking out all the lighting, and
Mhm.
which means the actors are sitting there doing nothing. It's what most people think is like the most boring day, because you're there for like 8 hours, you're not doing anything. And I
Mhm.
just remember being so excited and having fun and cracking jokes with everybody in the middle of the mundane. And I think that was when I kind of was like, I think I could do this, like as a job. If I can enjoy the more tedious, slow parts of this, maybe this is something that I could actually like go on to do.
For
So
sure.
yeah, so a year later I graduated, went to college, and I had all this free time now because when you enter college, you have a couple of classes, and then you're like, all right, what am I going to do now?
Right.
Um, and I had dabbled in some voice acting. I had done I had done video editing and recording and stuff like that when I was younger. Um, I tried my hand at producing this fan dub, and then in college, I was like, I've got some money. Like, I have a closet that has some space. What if I just give this a shot? So I bought a microphone, an audio interface, some acoustic foam, put it up on the walls in my closet, and I just started looking for auditions online,
Mhm.
auditioning for audiobooks and um, a bridge series and all of those sorts of things,
Mhm.
and just sort of practicing and practicing and doing is spending as much as my free time doing that as possible. And then um, something sort of interesting happened at the end of my freshman year of college. I had gone in as a computer science major, not as a theater or acting major
Right.
at all. It wasn't something I had really considered. I didn't know that like you could make it into a career. It seemed like a fantastical thing that only a small amount of people get to
Right.
do.
Right.
So I was like, well, maybe this is something I could do on the side or later. But very quickly, I realized, computer science isn't for me. It's interesting to me, but not enough for me to stay up 24 hours, like into the late night, just l- scouring through code and all that. So I ended up switching to another major, but one of the classes I was taking, I ended up not passing, and it made up quite a bit of amount of credits.
Right.
So that meant that the scholarship I had to go to that school, I was no longer eligible for.
Mm.
So at the end of my freshman year, I was no longer able to go to the school that I thought I would be at for the next 4 years, and everything was sort of thrown up into the air, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So I applied to some other colleges and was sort of facing the inevitable 3-month waiting period. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I need to do something in the meantime. So I figured like, okay, what if I like got an internship in Los Angeles, tried to do something in the entertainment industry, like voice acting. I'm enjoying this. Maybe I can work at a studio. So I ended up sending out my resume and making inquiries, and ended up at the studio in Burbank. Um, and the first day, I was giving the tour, being given the tour of the studio, and they're like, "Hey, so we're recording this show in the other room called One Punch Man." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And at this point, no one knew that the dub was coming out yet. But they were like, "Yeah, do you want to sit in on the session and watch?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I went in and met the director and the engineer, and then the actor walks in, and it's this guy who's no older than me. Like, at this point, I was maybe 18. He was like maybe even younger than me. And so I'm watching them and work on the show and go back and forth, and I'm just entranced in what's going on. I think it was so cool to watch the process happen and everyone working back and forth. And then the session ends. I leave the room, and immediately I walk into the producer's room and I go, "Hey, so like, is it possible for like interns or employees to like audition for these sorts of projects?" And she's like, "Get back to me like in a couple of weeks. I'll see what I can do." And then a month later, I ended up getting cast for incidental characters in this same show I saw my first day, One Punch Man, and
Yeah.
that was the first professional credit I had to my name. And from there, it's
Blew up.
been, yeah, 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, it's only been a few years and you're already have a wonderful, extensive list of credits, and your resume is just constantly building um, exponentially almost. Um, Now, so for these few years, and I saw on your IMDb, are you SAG?
Yeah, that's right.
So you, in in these few couple of years, you've already gone SAG. Now, going SAG, did you find it more difficult or easier to book roles?
Great question. I I don't know if it was going SAG that made booking roles easier. I kind of think like there's almost like downward hill motion. I think like when you start booking and working more consistently, it kind of grows exponentially, because
Mhm.
you think like you get one opportunity and then maybe it leads to another two opportunities, and then people from that want to give you more opportunities, and it kind of just grows and grows and grows.
Mhm.
It's kind of like riding a wave, I guess. So by the time I had joined the union, I had made quite a few connections to where I had a lot more union SAG opportunities. One of, I think, my second or third SAG project, right before I was a must join, was the director on that came up to me and was like, "Hey, so you're great, and if you're looking for an agent, any agent you want, let me know. I will hit them up and recommend you." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay." So I thought about it for a little bit and got back to him. I was like, "I think I want to go with this agency called CESD."
Mhm.
So I got referred to them almost, wow, like a year ago. Ended up signing with them, and since then I've had like a lot of the stuff. I want to say probably the majority of the things I audition for now are union projects, because
Right.
I get quite a few auditions for my agent. So it was a balance between joining the union, timed out with being on the specific project, with signing with an agent, getting more opportunities, more people taking notice, and me meeting more people. So it's a lot sort of had to lay itself out and click
So it kind of
together.
just fell into place all at the same.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's fabulous. Now, uh, the a lot of people say, and this is probably true, a lot of union actors can't do non-union projects unless they have union availability or they pay union rates. How do you find trying to do indie work, or you just don't do indie work any longer?
So it's actually it's a tricky situation at the moment. So there's the union right now has been trying to reorganize in the aftermath of, well, a lot of different things. Number one, a couple years ago there was the big video game voice acting strike, and
Mhm.
um, basically there was a lot of things in the contract that needed to be updated, and these video game companies sort of made the decision that, like, okay, well, we don't need you, we can just hire actors who are non-union.
Mhm.
And so during that period of time, a lot of big AAA titles went non-union temporarily. Talent were replaced on several big games. So during that period, a lot of those titles sort of fell into the non-union space. And after the strike ended and the contract was re-updated, not all of them were sort of brought back up.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of clients are like, well, this is easier. We can just sit in the non-union area, and there are plenty of actors there. And not only that, combined with that, the foreign dubbing contract. So this would be the union contract for anime, live
Mhm.
action dubbing, and all of that had not been updated in over 20 years. It was a very, and it still hasn't. We're currently we're trying to get the contract updated to, you know, modern standards. But
Yeah.
so we there was this really old contract, and SAG at the time, it was only been in the last year or two, SAG didn't have a voiceover department, so there was no even chain of command or communication for updating it um, properly. So a lot of anime has been in the non-union space because of that, and also because a lot of it's been dubbed over in Dallas, but they don't have a union out there.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, that all combined made it so that a lot of work has been going non-union, and also a lot of actors who are union are working off card on non-union projects. I mean, just because that's where a lot of the work is. You
Yeah.
know, if you want to work in the majority of anime and even big named video games, that's sort of where the space is. And there's an option basically where you can work union and non-union jobs sort of the proper way, but the
Mhm.
union highly discourages it, and they kind of they kind of, if you go to their website, they sort of demonize people who do it. But anyway, their website's very clear that, like, if you do this, like, you're not a part of the union, you're scalping jobs from other people, blah blah blah. And anyway, it's a complicated situation to where actors are sort of working in the middle. So for me, I've been working with the union to make a lot of us actors have been pulling together to make update the contracts make
Mhm.
sure more jobs are flipped union, make sure non-union jobs are, at the very least, if they're not going to go union, are following non-union standards,
Right.
and sort of raising awareness about these issues. So to answer your question in the long sense, yes, I still do non-union and indie projects. Not as much, just because the union stuff is taking up more of my time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a complicated situation that everyone's navigating different ways.
Yeah. So it's more of a you're just so busy with union work that you're like, I don't need to audition for non-union projects. But say a non-union indie project comes across your lap and you're like, this looks very interesting. It's kind of
Yeah.
you would audition for it if you saw fit.
Yeah, well, I think more generally, the further along I've gotten in my career, the more selective I've gotten
Mhm.
with projects in general. There are even union projects that would pay very nice, but I don't have an exact interest in,
For sure.
where it's like creatively, it's like, well, if I'm not interested in this and I'm not gonna and that's gonna keep me from putting my best audition forward,
Hmm.
then maybe my talent would be best served somewhere else.
Hmm.
Um, so that's why I've always kept myself open to all sorts of projects, indie projects, online projects, as well as the bigger AAA video games and union stuff, because it's
For
more,
sure.
if it's going to be engaging and fun and meaningful for me, then I can bring something to this project.
For sure.
If not, then I wouldn't bother. I would rather not bother, because I've been in projects where I was like, yeah, I don't care. And I've auditioned for things where I'm like, if I if I cared enough for this project, like I could have done much better, but I did not.
You're like, I don't care if I get cast either way.
Yeah, yeah, and you shouldn't want to be like that.
Right.
So for me, again, like the longer my career has gone, it's been a little easy. It's become easier for me to be more selective, because I'm not as worried as like, oh, where's my next job coming from?
Right.
I have some repeat clients and some ongoing projects to where it's like, I think I can pass on this one and put my energy towards something else.
Fantastic. Now, you did mention that you're signed with CESD. I know that talent agencies is a very, very, very hot topic, especially with the newer voice actors or ones that have been in the industry for just a few years. I mean, you've been in a few years and you've exploded already. But I know I've talked to other talents such as PM Seymour, and he signed with an agency, but he's found that his agency kind of sends him some work, but it's not really making up a lot of his income or a lot of his projects that he's being a part of. How beneficial has an agent been for your career?
So for me personally, it's been immensely beneficial. But that's really, agents are a very situational sort of
Hmm.
deal. There are a lot of big professional voice actors who are in huge projects who do not have an agent. And the reason for that is mostly because they haven't, it's a combination of they haven't pursued it, but the reason they haven't pursued it is there hasn't been a need.
Right.
So I always say, like, if you want something, if you in your career, like you really want it, you posit a goal, um, you sort of orient and shift your perceptions towards that goal, and everything you do now serves that goal.
Hmm.
So if you want an agent, like you really, really want it, or you really want anything in life or in your career, you have to start asking yourself the questions like, okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? What sacrifices do I need to make? What people do I have to talk to?
Hmm.
Like, even if it's like uncomfortable or embarrassing, or you feel like, a lot of people in their careers are afraid, like, oh, I don't want to reach out because I don't want to feel like that. I don't want them to feel like I'm using them, something like that. That's a big one that comes out up a lot, even with a lot of my professional voice actor friends. Um, and for me, it's, you you kind of have to work through those feelings and understand that, like, look, we're all this is all our career, right? We
Yeah.
all hopefully like working together and like the people we work with. But you have to be honest with what you want, and part of that means being honest with other people as well. Where it's like, hey, like, here's something that I'm interested in doing. If you're comfortable like sharing, like, could you help me out, or could you give me some advice?
Mhm.
So with agents, a lot of the time it's you need to know that you're ready for an agent, that it's what you want,
Mhm.
because having an agent is different from going out and knocking on studio doors or sending emails or sort of building up your own client list, because you have a level of control in that. With an agent, now you brought in another person who has a vested who a should have a vested interest in your career because they're only making 10% off of the jobs you make.
Right.
Right. So they need to be active and available for you. So if they have someone on their talent roster that has the same voice as you or similar to you or too many similar
Mhm.
to you, they may not have the time to dedicate towards being like, hey, this person, this Griffin guy, you should give him a chance. They're
Right.
going to be focused on their talent that they've had for longer.
Mhm.
Or they may be a small talent agency with a different model. There's some talent agencies who will just take on as much talent as possible and hope that, like, because they have a lot,
Yeah.
they're going to get a lot more, which doesn't wor- kind of works, but it's not the best way to play it. The best agencies have a very small, selective pool of talent
Mhm.
who are highly talented and get all the work. I mean, you think
Yeah.
about like a university like Harvard, like
Mhm.
4,000 students go to Harvard, and the entry process is so difficult. But the
Yeah.
entry process is sort of that the screening process is almost like it helps in presenting their students where it's like, hey, look, they're from Harvard, or hey, they're with Atlas Talent, or they're with CESD. You
Yeah.
know, we're like they
They are the
producers.
Ivy League agencies.
Exactly. Producers are going to listen to those auditions first
Mhm.
because the selecting process is um so specific.
Yeah.
So for some people, and especially like in the beginning of my career, I signed with a much lower tier agency and I definitely worked much harder than my agent. And had to like hound them for for checks, hound them for like, hey, I did this audition. I thought I got cast. Like, have you gotten back to the producer? Because some of these agencies, again, who do the big like cattle call talent pools, like they'll just forget because
Right.
there's too many people to consider. So I think it sort of depends on where you live, what you want. If you're working in an anime and that's all you're doing, hey, you don't need an agent. Agents aren't really interested in anime, A, because a lot of it's non-union. Um, the checks aren't that big. They kind of
Right.
like you keep the check, it's fine. Um, and your money, if you're working a lot on anime, a lot of your money is actually going to probably be coming from cons. Like that's sort of where a lot of the money is. With anime, I mean, obviously you make money off the series, but going to conventions, you make what like
You
exponentially
continue
more. You
your
continue, yeah, exactly. You continue off of just a couple of shows or whatever. But
yeah.
if you're like, well, I like anime, but I really want to do more prelay or big AAA video games, and I can't get those auditions without an agent, that's when you sort of shift your perception. And also, like, if you want to be living in a place where these big agencies are. So New York and LA. Unfortunately, Dallas, they have some good agents, but and some pretty big projects that pass through, but not as much. And
Not
so
not the
if
same.
you're yeah, so if you're living in those areas, don't be too surprised if it's like, oh, well, I don't really get a whole lot from my agent. I get more from my online work or from
Right.
my own personal client list. It's like, yeah, well, you cultivated those lists and worked harder for them much more than your agent has worked for you.
Right.
So, yeah.
I have a similar experience. I have an agent that I signed on within 8 months of starting voiceover, 9 months, something like that. Very small boutique in Seattle. Uh, I've had more auditions or more casting calls for on camera than I have for voiceover.
Mm,
But then again, they also have it's a small talent, so it's not a huge roster. But I was like, I'm signed here for voiceover. So yes, if I do get on camera, if I'm available, sure. But this is not where I'm interested. I do most of my work at home because I would rather do that. Because again, casting call or their auditions are Monday through Friday at a specific time. I'm like, I'm working. I don't have the ability to do this as a full time career, and it unfortunately, I don't have that ability. And they're like, that's totally fine. We'll just have you. And if it works out, great. I said, sure, we'll do on camera and voiceover. So I have had one on camera roll through them, but nothing really besides a couple auditions and 2 or 3 voiceover. Now they also did, and this is where I was like, that's not probably the right way. They even said on their Facebook, because they have a private group, and they go, we only take X amount of a percentage of what we cast you in, 10% or 20%. However, if you do land a role outside of the agency, you should also send us 20%. I was like, "Excuse me?" It's like, that doesn't seem right because, 1, I'm working my tail off to land a role that maybe sends in $200. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna send you 20% of that $200.
Yeah, and again, I think like when I wasn't living in California, I was looking for an agent like that same situation came up for me where it's like, oh well, we don't get a whole lot of voiceover, but we do a lot of like print modeling or we do a lot of on camera, and it's like, yeah, that's not what I'm doing though. So
Mhm.
um and and yeah, the contracts get very complicated. Like there are a lot of scam artists that
Yeah.
appear very reputable, but really it's, they're taking a much bigger percentage or
Mhm.
they're trying to get cuts off of jobs they didn't even book for you.
Yeah.
I think it gets a little trickier once you join the union. But if you're signed with an agent and you've joined the union, like it's a difference. Obviously it's a different situation. So if they're like, hey, a union project you book, like, we've signed it so that we are your exclusive agent on union projects, so it needs to go through us, which is like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, Now, when you get a project and you are sitting, you're ready to audition. Now, I know sometimes auditions you get the script like the day of. You're going into audition. Like, here's the script. You're like, crud. I have to figure out this character. What are maybe some of the first details at a glance that you look at to determine a character's personality and kind of the voice to go with?
So the first details I look at, if there's a picture's the biggest help because sort of being able to sort of imagine the physicality of the character or certain facial expressions sort of give you your initial um impressions of the character. It's sort of like meeting someone for the first time. The first thing is you're going to see them and what they look like, and you're instantly going to make judgments about that.
Mhm.
Next, I look at the description. For me, the less description I read, the better. What I always hate, and it's always fantasy auditions, which I love fantasy,
Yeah.
but I don't need the whole Bible on the character. I need this much
Yeah.
because I don't I think the more information an actor has, the less effective they are because um because if you're thinking about too much or you're trying to plan out your performance to match the overarching story, then you're not acting. You're not playing the character, you're thinking like the writer.
Mhm.
The character doesn't know the full picture. He only knows a small part of himself. Like most characters probably identify most with their persona, what
Mhm.
the part of themselves that people perceive and they put out there.
Mhm.
But a lot of times a story is about uncovering what's underneath that and growing and integrating the darker side of you or the side of you that you've neglected or forgotten. So the less information, the better. And then the dialogue helps as well, knowing how they speak and sort of their mannerisms, inserting mannerisms into the way they speak. That's
Mhm.
sort of my process. And yeah, for voiceover, most of the time, um, I'll get an email and a deadline for submitting. It's usually a day or two or maybe a week if I'm lucky.
Mhm.
And so I'll go through, sort of do a rough like table read with myself and kind of rough through the scene and get some ideas for like, okay, well, maybe I could do this or move this way or blah blah blah. And so yeah, those are sort of my first instincts because a lot of the I think with acting, less is more. Like, you make strong use a good actor knows how to make, strong decisions.
Mhm.
Um, that doesn't mean go big, that doesn't always mean go small, but it means make the decision. Being able to explain in a paragraph what your motivation is doesn't make you an actor. You
Right.
need to be able to you need to break it down to as simple as you can, and then let the interplay between your circumstances and the action on the page create the story or the excitement, the electricity.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how I approach even online auditions is I might save something, I don't even look at it until I open it up, and then I look at the character, I'm like, "Okay," and then I make a decision,
Mhm.
because generally the first decision that you make on a character is usually right.
Yeah, it's the strongest one you could
It's
do.
the strongest one because you go, "This is what he sounds like, this is what he is," and then you maybe read a little bit more into who he is and go, my decision was a little off, but all I have to do is pitch it up a little bit or bring it down." But usually the first way you're thinking, "I'm gonna deliver it like this." I even sometimes read the details of a character. I'll start off with one voice, and as I start reading,
Yeah,
it
and then
goes
you'll slip
into
into it.
nonchalant, and I'll just bring it down, and I'll just, "Alright, there's his voice," and go. Uh,
Yeah, that's another thing I do. Yeah, I'll read it out loud and sort of slip into the voice and then tune it, and then it's like, all right, cool. I got something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have your maybe 2 other takes where you might do a little bit more variation, where
Mhm.
you might extend it a little bit into something else to give them a different take entirely? But that's my approach, and it seems a similar approach, and I think that a lot of talent or a lot of newer voice talent take too much time into their auditions.
Oh yeah, a lot of like veteran voice actors I know take too much time.
Yeah.
Like, or not really or people I'm working with I know will spend like 30 minutes on an audition or an hour, and I just am like, how can you waste that much time? I say like 5 to 10 minutes. That's it.
Yeah.
Like you need to limit yourself. It's like, all right, you have 5 lines, you get 3 attempts per line. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the reason you need to constrain yourself in that manner is art art is all about constraints.
Mhm.
Like the great thing about art is you can do anything, but the horrible thing about art is you can do anything.
You can do
And
anything.
good art is limited. And the reason you limit yourself is it's like, okay, I have 3 attempts to get this line perfect or right or
Mhm.
make a decision. So you're not gonna dilly dally or BS your way through it. You're gonna be forced to make precise decisions.
Right.
And you're not gonna be perfect at it at first, but the more you do it, the more it's like, oh wow, there you go. And you become better at making strong decisions.
Yeah.
Um, and that shows to the casting directors, or even the voice directors in sessions. If you can make really strong decisions and get there quicker than other actors, it makes their job easier because they're like, oh great, wow, we're breezing through this. And also
Mhm.
like it shows that like you're it, that the level of attention and detail you put towards your performance is it shows
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, especially if you have, say, 10 auditions and
Right, yeah, you're gonna spend 10
you spend 20
hours.
to 30 minutes or more on
Yeah,
one, there goes 5 hours of your entire day,
yeah.
or
Mhm.
5 hours expanded through several days. You're either, 1, gonna miss out on opportunities, or 2, you're spending way too much time. Spend time with family and friends and experience other things instead of sitting in the booth trying to create a single character.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you have to sort of take a lot of the importance off of yourself. Like you're not this isn't your character, right? You're the
Right.
actor. Like your job is to act. And
Mhm.
and that means to play the role. So you have two jobs. It's play, which is the action, and it's the role, which is a set of circumstances. So learn the set of circumstances, key in on a couple keywords or traits, learn what the action is, read the script, what's he doing, what's going on,
Mhm.
and then put those two things together. That's it. Literally, that's at its simplest form. That's all you have to do. And yeah, you want to open yourself up to other things and not spend an hour in the booth. Like the less time I spend auditioning and focused on other things, the better.
Yeah.
Like because you'll drive yourself crazy if
Oh, for
work takes
sure,
over your life.
for
Yeah,
sure. I maybe even spend a total of hour, maybe 2 hours auditioning in an entire week.
yeah.
Like, I'm like, I don't have time to audition all the time. I might step in once, maybe twice a week, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and then if I have a project, then obviously I'll sit in. If I have a due date, then I'll sit in and do my project. But that's where I might take a little bit more time to actually develop the character.
Right, because now that's the creative process, right?
Yeah.
Like the audition process and the actual process of being in a role are two different things.
Mhm.
Like the audition, it's like it's almost like improv. It's like you're handed the script, you're handed the rules, go, and then you're like, all right, here it is. And then the next thing is like, okay, now you're a part of this. Now you have to craft the character. You know, you can take a little bit more time in preparing and all of that. So
For sure. Now, what are maybe some of the complications of working in ADR?
complicated.
Ti
Like
Timing, the beeps, all the
oh,
short script and stuff like that. I know that it gets mentioned in some ADR workshops like, Kira Buckland's, but I know that, there's not enough information that a lot of these actors who want to do ADR, they will there's more to it than just saying, "Oh, yeah, there's short script or there's the beeps in your ears," because everyone has their own timing and rhythm and stuff like that to kind of match the mouth flaps.
right. Yeah, so there's ADR, it's a funny thing. ADR is probably one of the more specialized skills in voice acting, but it's also one of the lower paying jobs in voice acting, which
Mhm,
really it's really unfortunate because, these anime voice actors are really, really talented. And a lot of them work on a bunch of other projects. Some of them only work on anime, but that skill set takes time. It helps if you have a musical ear. Like if you have a sense of rhythm,
mhm.
um, you basically what I'll do is when I actually just posted a video on this maybe a week or two ago, sort of demonstrating like the ADR dubbing process from my home studio. Um, and what I'll do is the first thing you do is they'll preview the line. We go line by line in ADR, and you preview it in Japanese first. So you get the beeps. So the beep beep beep, and then where the fourth beep would be, that's when you start talking.
Okay.
And you watch the Japanese, and when I'm watching the Japanese, I'm at the very back of my head, I'm thinking about the performance. I'm not really thinking about the performance.
Mhm.
Like I'm not trying to listen to what the actor's doing. What I'm watching is I'm looking at the English line that I'm about to say, the lip flaps on screen, and I'm already I'm whispering it in my head. Like, okay, ba 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 ba. Okay, that's how I'm gonna make it fit. So I think of acting as like there's the preparation stage and the execution stage, and the ADR lays that out super clearly. Okay, here's the scene. Here's your preparation. Okay, here's the execution. Okay, the execution didn't go exactly right. You missed a flap here. You went too fast. Okay, make this part a little longer. Preparation, preparation, execution. And then eventually the two things line up and your preparation matches your execution and then you move on. So it's tricky. And it requires you to sound in the moment and natural and be natural in the moment while also plotting out the music and rhythm of the scene and of the moment,
Mhm.
because like and it scales up in complication because first it's like maybe you just have a character standing there and it's ba 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 ba, maybe it's ba 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 break, ba 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 ba, maybe he's running, ba 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 ba, turns his head, jumps, there's an effort, and then he takes a hit and he rolls 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 rolls. Maybe he's running and he has a specific rhythm to his run, so your breath has to be so it gets more and more complicated the more you do. And the the best thing I can offer to people who it's like, well, I can't take ADR classes because I don't live there, or like I don't know what to do, is literally pick an anime you like, pick a character, watch it either in, I say if you can find a show with a Japanese and an English dub, try and switch back and forth between the two, but play a line, pause it, rewind, mute it, and then you try and say the line now. Like if you have the subtitles, try and read the subtitles. And then if the subtitles don't quite fit, try rewriting in your head where it's like, we have to like, hang on, we have to go this way. It's like, oh, it was much faster in the Japanese. It was just mate. So it's like, so this way, and that's literally how I practiced. If you're a little bit more computer like sound editing savvy, you can try downloading an episode, dropping it in like Adobe Audition or Premiere. You can find ADR beeps online and download the sample of it, um, drop it in the track, and then try recording it on your own. I'm trying to make more. I've been thinking about making more videos on like what the ADR process is like that are a little bit more in depth so that people can watch. I'm also trying to see if I can do ADR workouts over Skype. They worked before.
Mhm.
So if there are people who would be interested in doing that, that's probably something I would try and open up. Yeah, let's that for sure. If that's something you want to do, like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's definitely talk about it. But yeah, the complications just are in the technicalities. But once you sort of get that down,
Mhm.
um, you it it's just acting, really,
For sure.
but just with more constraints, I would say.
Of course. Now, on top of complication, there comes the joys of working in ADR. What is something that you enjoy the most out of it?
Oh, anime is just a blast. Like, I I've done both live action dubbing and anime, and I much prefer anime. Live action dubbing, the problem is it's very different. It's not you're kind it's kind of acting, but it's kind of not. You're basically laying down the English language track for another show.
Mhm.
Um and the actor's already there. Like, he's literally on screen. You see what he looks like and it's like, well, that's not me. And you're there's a lot less freedom in embodying the character. It's more like you're embodying a voice, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, where people are like, well, voice acting is not about the voice. It's like, well, with live action sometimes it feels like that. With anime, it's animation and you're adapting it to English, so you there's a sense of like, oh, like, I can sort of be myself in this role, or bring a lot of more of myself in this, and circumstances are a lot more fun and engaging, or dark and complex. And yeah, I mean, the joys of anime it's like are the joys of watching anime. Like, you're engaged and a part of this story that's you don't always get to see in Western animation. Very rarely you get to see stories get this complex or dark, and are geared more towards young adults. A lot more young adult animation in the West is a lot more comedy, which is fine. Those shows have their place, but we don't get like serious, like melodramas in animation.
Or
But with anime you do.
psychopaths.
Right, exactly. So and you get to have a lot more fun with it. So that's definitely the joy for me.
For
Like,
sure.
working on the shows, like Gundam was one of like the hardest some of the toughest acting I've had to do in my career, because it's like the circumstances are so the stakes are so high and the circumstances are so dramatic and harsh, um and beautiful as well. So yeah, I love doing it.
For sure. Where would you like to see yourself kind of as you continue in this process? Where would you like to see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Mm. Oh, 10 years is too long. 5 years. I'm trying to do I'm constantly trying to challenge myself with new things. And right now the current challenge I'm working on is on camera acting. I want to get more into television and sitcoms. It's something I've always been interested in, because there's been this conversation among voice actors on Twitter here and there, where I don't know what it is. It's probably a lot of actors are very sensitive, but we can get very protective of our career and what we do. And people are like, "Oh, but do you do real acting?" It's like, voice acting is real acting.
Mhm.
What we do is just as hard. And if we're being honest, what we do is not as hard as on-camera acting. On-camera acting, it's like you don't have the script. You have to have it memorized. You're wearing a costume. You're on set, interacting with other people. There's a million things you have to think about,
Oh, yeah.
while also not thinking about, because you're acting. So it is much harder, but that doesn't mean that voice acting isn't real acting. It's a
Right.
different kind of acting. And for me, like, I the my first couple of years doing voice acting, I've loved it. And I've made um I've gotten to participate in a lot of different projects that are real passions of mine. But I'm always looking for, like, okay, what's the next challenge? How can I improve even more? And I want to start challenging myself more on the on-camera side of things, with more physical or comedic acting. Um, more of the subtleties of film and all of that. So I'm sort of shifting, not sort of opening myself up more to those opportunities while
Expanding.
not be expanding, right? Because a lot of people are always like, oh, well, like I don't want to be shoehorned into being just a voice actor. I'm like, look, like you get to pick your label, right? You know, and the problem if with that is like you might start neglecting voice acting because you don't want to be associated with that. Like that's not what I'm trying to do. I love voice acting. I hope people love my work and see it and recognize me for that. That's awesome. But at the same time, I want to be so much more than that. So I like to think of it as opening myself up to other opportunities
Mhm.
instead of moving away or shifting to something else.
Yeah.
Like I'm no longer a voice actor. It's like, or I want to be more of this. It's like, no, this is something I'm looking towards. It's another challenge, and it's gonna force me to attempt things and do things that I wouldn't be able to do in voice acting. So,
Mhm.
um, so in the next 5 years, I mean, I still want to be voice acting. I still want to be acting, and I hope to be participating in more on-camera shows
Of course.
and film and all those things because um, it's a whole nother challenge, and just a level of the level of talent there is also so exciting. I remember when I first got into voice acting, there was a laundry list of people I wanted to work with. And I've been lucky to have worked with a lot of these people and gotten to learn from them and become friends. And now with the on camera world, it's sort of that same thing where it's like, oh, I want to work with this actor and this one and really get to know what their process is like. And yeah.
Awesome. Now, is there a project that you can talk about? And if not, that you're one excited about, or if you can't talk about one that you're excited that just released?
Let me think. Oh, I'll sort of answer both. The one title I've been excited about that just got released was River City Girls. I recorded that about maybe a year and a half, a while ago. It was like a year and a half ago, something like that. And I sort of, I didn't forget about it. I remembered the game, but I didn't. It's one of those projects where it's like you don't really know what it's going to be until it comes out. And I remember it came out and just the response from people was so positive. Everyone was really enjoying the game and um, really liked all the characters. So that was one I was definitely proud of. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, awesome. Like, it was a ton of fun to work on as well. Um, Similarly, there's an anime show I'm working on right now. Season one's out called Kengan Ashura, and that's been a ton of fun. It's these big like MMA fighters like just smashing each other to pieces. Um, and season two is coming out at the end of October, so for a month from now. And me and KG Tang's character are gonna face off, and it was one of the most oh gosh, my voice was gone by the end of that session. We were yelling and growling and hissing at each other. It was yeah, it was interesting. So those two for sure. And then future projects, oh gosh, there's a lot coming down the pipeline I'm really excited about. I think next year a few of them are going to be announced at Comic-Con, a couple are going to be announced at E3. So I'm definitely excited for summer of next year when I
Awesome.
get to talk about these projects.
Yeah. So where can people go to find more about you and more about your work to kind of follow up and keep up with you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Griffin Puatu, Puatu. The same on Instagram. You can also find me on YouTube. I upload voice acting clips and stuff there, as well as music and singing occasionally. Just search my name, you'll find me. You can find me on IMDb. You can find my website, griffvoices.com. And yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your time and talking.
yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Slate with guest Griffin Puatu. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button to stay notified. I look forward to seeing you again.
I'm trying to think. There was one big one. It was the I can't remember the name of the title, but anyway. So during
Growing
that
forward.
period, yeah, and called uh what is it?
Because yeah, you and then yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's very clear. Like if you go, I forgot what it's called.